Welcome everybody to our YouTube channel. This is a tutorial we're doing for a take-home project for our little baby Yoda. It's an embossed metal project. So we're just going to go over first. Let's start with everything that came in your kit and everything you'll need. The first thing we have is 2 sheets of a foam pad. We're going to use those as a cushion so that when we press down with the pen and do some embossing, it actually has a cushion to go into so that it gives us a nice embossment. Second thing is already taped on is our template and a sheet of 36 gauge, I believe it is, metal that it's attached to. It's important that it's taped on and we keep it taped on until we're complete with the outline. We've completed the outline, because if we can lift it up and look underneath and see, make sure we got everything on here. But we don't want to take it off of the tape off, because we'll never realign it in the right, realigned. We will never realign it in exactly the right space again. So I've turned the lights down here a little bit because there is a glow, that reflection kind of from the lights that we have here. So you might want to do that at your place too. You want to see, but you don't want to glare. You don't have to worry about that when you're doing the initial outline, but once you're working on the metal itself, could be a problem. So I hope you guys can see over here we have 7 different alcohol inks, or actually the first one is just the isopropyl alcohol, number 1. They're all numbered, so we'll go through them by number when we need to use them. Alcohol inks are a very vibrant, translucent color. They're really great. The only one that's not translucent is the white, and that's the only one that you need to shake pretty well, because all the pigment settles to the bottom. So every time you use that, before you use that, you need to give it a shake. So there's a couple different ways we can go with mixing white into our palette as part of our kit here as well. A few cotton pads, some cotton swabs. I don't know where they went, but they're around here somewhere. Some precision tipped swabs that we're going to use to do our coloring, get in smaller spaces, and some regular cotton swabs as well that we're going to use. So let's put the palette aside. Also, you guys have a pair of gloves. Everybody's got a pair of gloves. We don't need to put them on until we use the paint. But if you don't put them on, it'll create a staining. Your hands will end up looking something like mine. Even though we're washing a lot lately, it'll still stay on there for a while. So once we get to the painting, we'll use the gloves. We're going to start with is just a ballpoint pen. You guys have anything like that? If you don't, a pencil that's not super sharp but pretty sharp. We want to use this with more pressure than we would if we were writing, because we want to create an indentation. And you can always pick up and check. Now this one, I've already done the outline, so you can see on here, I hope, that he's already outlined. And periodically throughout, I will pick it up and look underneath to make sure I have every one of these black lines. Everything that's in here that's black, except for the centers of the eyes, is getting embossed. As well as these areas of the folds in his robe, we're going to go ahead and fill them in like we're coloring them in, right over this. The other way you can tell what you got is because you can actually feel it on your template. You can feel what areas you've missed, what areas you got. The important thing is we do not want to remove it completely with the tape until we're sure we have the whole embossment. So I usually start with around the outside, and I press down and I kind of go over it a few times. If you start out light, you create like a little bit of a groove in there, and then it's easier for you to kind of stay in that channel. Best thing I can tell you as a trick to drawing, sketching, tracing, anything like that, is to always work drawing towards your body, because you're going to have a cleaner, better line. You can also see where you're going, because you need to see where you're going. If your hand or your thumb is in the way, you can't see where you're moving to next. You tend to make some mistakes. So don't forget that this can be turned around. You don't want to have to turn your arm this way or that way. Just keep turning it around, and you keep pressing down with firm pressure Again, if you guys are doing this with some kids and they're younger and they don't have the strength, you may want to help them out with that. I try not to skip from one area to another so that I make sure that I get everything. And again, I can feel on here, or I can pull it up and make sure I got each and every area I need to. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It's also okay because you are using firm pressure. If you're breaking the paper, you're probably pressing too hard. Certainly if you're breaking the metal, you're pressing too hard. But if you start out lightly and then just gradually increase pressure, you will be able to get each and every one of these. That includes all the wrinkles in his head, around his nose, all of that stuff. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Be sure you're doing this at home. It should be fun. So you may get some hand cramping or tired. Take a break. Come back to it in a little while. But once we're sure that we have everything completely outlined, we can go ahead and remove this from the metal. And then we're going to want to turn it over, because this is the back side now. And we're going to want to take one of these precision tip swabs and all the areas within his body, not the background, but within his body that already seem to be going forward because we created that outline with the background. We're going to go ahead and push that forward more, slowly stretching the metal. So you can go a little easier, but just keep going over it. If you go too hard, you'll create some creasing in there. It's not the worst thing, but you know, it's always easier to just go lightly enough, and you can always go back over it. In the larger areas, like the robe, you can use this on its side so that it doesn't create so much texture in there. You can use it on its side and just put pressure on it on its side. In smaller areas where you're like in between outline, you can use the point of it more so. And actually, if you're doing some really areas where the outline is very, very close together, you can close that ballpoint pen and use that in between. Or if you're careful, see, like right in between these here, to pop that forward also. If you're careful, you can also use just the ballpoint itself, but just don't press too firmly, because we don't want to break the metal. We don't have to worry about the ink getting on here, because this is the back side, so we don't have to worry about that. You won't see that. And as you get near, even like near these edges, it's always good to use the ballpoint to kind of square that out to where it's a nice clean line. So you're going to go ahead and do everything that's within his body. And again, if you do dim your lights a little bit, once we get some paint on here, the glare will not be nearly as bad. But right now, if you're having difficulty seeing, either move to an area that is out of the direct bulb, like the light itself, if you can. So we're going to get everything now. Before we use the paints themselves, it's a good idea to put some type of plastic covering over your sturdy table that you're working on. If you don't have that, maybe a few sheets of newspaper, a few layers of newspaper, and that's just to protect your work surface. If you do get alcohol ink, you don't want to get it on your clothes. If you do get it on your any other hard surface, you can use alcohol to take it off, but you really shouldn't have too much of a problem with that. And again, as I get into these little areas, I'm going to use the pen. If you find that by accident you flattened out one of your parts of your outline and you kind of flattened it back out again, you can always turn this around and push it back out again. Now this area that we've already pushed forward from the opposite side, we don't want to mess with that. We'll just go around that. We don't want to push that forward again, because that's going to give us more texture and more of a 3D effect. So I don't know if you can see this area right down here is the area that we've done. Now there's a little bit of embossment that comes naturally from this side because we use the cushion behind it, but we're going to make that much more pronounced just like this side. I don't know if you can see that, but you could definitely feel the difference between this and this. I'm going to go ahead and do the whole Yoda as well as the heart. If you're having any trouble, you can always, like, not being able to decipher what it is, you can always use your original template. Keep that next to you so you could see, use that as a guide as well. So definitely in between these wrinkles on his head, we're going to use the pen, and it's okay to have this part of the embossment especially have some texture to it because he's kind of furry, so that only adds a little bit more texture to your embossment. Try to go the direction that the hair or his fur would normally be going. In these tiny areas. Kind of round in the center of his eyes, slowly to push that forward. See right there, got a little bit over. I'll kind of crease that out again, so I want to come in on this side and bring that back again a little bit. Okay. So also on this side, right around, let's just kind of outline this little doodle that's right above right below the heart. Okay, looks like we got everything good. So you see from this side, everything is nice. We're going to take these two pads away now because we need a hard surface. And we're just going to go ahead and just to accent this embossment, it's going to go ahead and trace around just the outer edges of his body and the heart. Don't worry about too much in here. And that's just going to kind of flatten the background back out again so that we have a very distinct embossment. Again, if you do this with pencil or pen, it doesn't matter. Just don't go so hard that you break through the metal. And now that we're working on a hard surface, it's not actually pushing it the other direction, but just flattening it out. If you have any kinks or anything in your background, you can also use this on its side to kind of flatten those out. Nice and light, because you don't want to create a lot of texture in the background. You just want to flatten out anything that seems to be a little bumpy. Okay, so we're going to move on to gloves. Okay, gloves. The gloves, we have a palette here. What we want to start with is just a few drops of black in one of the wells of the palette. Let's go with 5 approximately. I'm going to take one of the pads or cotton balls. I'm going to use the number 1. So black was the number 7. And then we change out to the number 1, which is just the basic isopropyl alcohol. And we want to wet this pretty well so that we don't want it dripping or anything like that. Just want to wet it well enough that, because the alcohol inks tend to dry out real quickly. So we're just going to dab a little bit of black on that, and we're going to start right on the same place where you put the alcohol. And we're going to start using this to very lightly, just a light touch. We want to go around all of our embossment kind of in a circular motion because we want to get some black in all of those little crevices that we've just created before we move on to our background. So as you can see, as you go over this lightly, more and more of the black settles into those crevices, and it's easier for you to see your actual design. Just go over that a few times. As it starts to dry out, if it's too dark or if it's just dry, add some more alcohol to it. If it's too light, you can add another drop or 2 of black, but you won't need a lot of black here, because we're actually, after we get this all, make sure that it gets in all of these edges and these crevices, we're going to remove a lot of the black right from Yoda himself. Okay, that looks good. See how it's all like kind of filled into these areas. So now we're going to just take, again, you might need a little bit more black, definitely some more blending solution, which is the alcohol, and we're going to use that to go streaking from top to bottom completely. So starting from off the top to right off the bottom. If you stop and start midway, you'll never be able to get kind of like we're looking for like a wood grain kind of look to this, and you're just never going to get enough of that. So a little bit more black. And up and down is the best way to go. Again, you don't press so hard that we're going to kind of flatten out our embossment for sure. We just want kind of like a gunmetal streak to the background. You may need even just another drop or two on the black. And this is taking a lot of the shine. It's a little strong there. So we use the other side of the pad. We just want, again, so this side now is dry. I can turn it around and touch it on this side with my gloves and it's not going to smear. And just get that background. Once we get the background exactly the way we want it, we don't want to have any drips come over it or anything like that because it's difficult to make repairs to it without going over the whole thing again. So we try to just leave that in its perfect place. We take a new swab, or a new pad, I'm sorry, and some blending solution. I'm going to fold that in half and just add blending solution to that, which is alcohol. It's wet enough, so we're going to use different sections of this to just, on all of the high points, everything that is pushed forward, we're going to wipe out that black. We don't have to get every bit of it, and we don't want it to settle down into the cracks, so we're just trying to lightly go over the top and take some of that black away from the areas that we're going to add color to. Be careful next to the edges so that you don't mess up your background. When we're just going to use this in the larger areas, and when we get to smaller areas near the edges, when the pad gets a little dirty, you can flip it over, put some more solution on, and just keep taking color out of there. Again, just from the top surface, not from any of the outline. If you go over this a few times, each time using a clean part of your pad, you should be good. And then lastly, I'm going to take a regular Q-tip. I don't want to do it right over the top of this in case it drips, but regular Q-tip, and add a couple of drops of the solution to this, the alcohol, and this I can use towards the edges. And as I clean areas off near the edge, I kind of twist it around so that I get a clean spot of the swab to work with. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to use the, your template guide as a guide to where your colors are going to be. We'll start with the magenta, which will do the heart, just the inside of this ear, maybe about halfway, because we're going to blend it into an orange and then to a yellow. And right here, same thing, about halfway. We'll then blend into an orange and to a yellow. And then just a tiny bit right there on his lips. So we're going to start by putting a few drops of magenta in one of these wells. Now, there's two ways to do this. With each color, you can add like maybe 1 or 2 drops most of a white to each of these colors, and that's going to give you more of an opaque look like this one is here. I don't know if you can see that. It does tend to make things a little bit more streaky, which is fine. It's just a textural thing. Happens to work, especially for this design. Or I don't know if you can see this heart here. It's still, if I just use the colors without the white, we're going to end up with more of a translucent effect where we can see the metallic glow behind it. So since this one is done with adding a little bit of white to each of these colors that I used in here, I'm going to go ahead and not use that on this one, then we can compare and you can decide which one you'd like to use. So again, the precision tipped swab. I'm going to go ahead and suck up that red. Takes a second, so you don't want it to be dripping as you pull it across, but definitely wet enough. So we're going to start with the inside of his ear over here. I'm going to say, I'm going to go about halfway, because when we add yellow to that, we're going to end up with an orange in the middle. Probably could use a little bit more than that. It's red. The red, by the way, is a number 4. Sorry about that. Enjoy the heart. Okay, a tiny bit in the lip area there. And then the red, more on an angle with this ear. So instead of this one, we went straight across. This one is a little bit more of an up and down angle. So we just go ahead and add that on like that. Okay, we're gonna also now add some yellow to our palette here. Use a new swab or the other end. For this, especially the other end works well because we're gonna go back and forth between ends. We're gonna suck up that yellow. We're gonna start at this end of the ear with the yellow. And as we move forward, after we get all of our yellow down, we can go ahead and start blending this into the magenta, and it'll pick up some magenta on the swab, and that's going to start creating an orange in between. I don't know if you can see that there. So where the yellow and the magenta meet and it starts to get on your swab there, we end up with a little bit of an orange. Some more yellow. Okay. So now new swab, we're going to switch out precision tip. Number 5 is the green. I'm going to pour some of that in one of these wells. About 6 to 8 drops in there. Again, I hope this is in frame here. But suck up the green. Just takes a second to just twirl it around. Make sure it's not dripping at all. And I'm going to use this. Could use a little more on there. To go over his whole face. Top of his ears. So I don't put too much ink in the wells at a time because they do tend to dry very quickly. If you decide to walk away, come back later on or the next day, and all your inks seem to be hardened, you can reconstitute them with a couple drops of alcohol. I also just don't put too much in at a time. This way they don't dry out on me too fast. But if they do dry out, I can add some alcohol to them. Also, if I want a paler shade, you can add alcohol to them as well. Create a paler shade. Some areas you may have to do a second quick coat on to get the depth of color. Same thing with the painting as with the drawing. Turn your artwork around as you need to, instead of twisting your arms up or guessing where you're going. Okay, that's pretty much the green. Turn that swab around or take a new one. Number 6, new paint well. There's about 8 drops in there. This is going to be a combination of a brown. So you can see on our original template, it's kind of shading. We go from a brown, let's do like brown towards this end, and then we'll add pop some highlights of yellow in there, and maybe even white as kind of like a piping around the edge if we need to. Yellow into that. So I'll add some more back to one of my wells with the yellow, and I'm just going to dip the brown swab into that. So we start to pull up some more yellow. And again, like I said, if you like the opaque look, just add a drop or two. You don't want to add too much because you don't want to make it too pastel into each of those colors except the black where you need to. Just to add. That's going to take this metallic-y kind of glow away, but I kind of like that. I do. Okay, new swab. Back to black. So we're going to put a little bit more black in that paint well. This we're going to use to do the eyes. A little bit more. The black may take you a couple of coats. So just go ahead and get your initial coat on there. Looks pretty good. And then one last time for the catch lights in the eyes, right around the eyes, we're going to add a little bit to that as well. I'm going to shake that white good. You can put it in the well or just directly onto the swab itself. Some white on there, right towards the top. So you see on this template there's a little horizontal, like a maybe like a rectangular shape right there, right there. They don't have to be exactly the same as those. They don't have to be perfect, but they should be at the same angle. So to the top and to the side, we're going to just add a little white catch light. As you put the white down, you'll see it show up, but then disappear into the black. So it's going to take a few coats of that white. See how you see that? See how it comes up, and as it dries, kind of fades down again. And then maybe one more time. Let me do just a little smear just to highlight around his eyes, right in there. We don't want to make it white, but just tone it a little bit. Okay, we're pretty much, almost pretty much done. The only other thing that I would suggest is if you have a thin tipped black marker, if not, you can go ahead and use a brand new swab that's nice and pointy on the end, a tiny bit of black. You can use this to fill in any of these areas that you feel like that you kind of lost your black in. You need like a little bit more color in there. And again, you can use a marker. Sometimes you have to draw out with it. Once it hits the metal, sometimes it stops working. You go around the outer edges. This particular area, I feel like we definitely need something in. You can also use, like I said, new tip. Not too much black. Directly in the tip, light touch. Just outline. Let me turn this around so. If you don't feel like it's coming out dark enough, just keep adding a tiny bit more, tiny bit more. We don't have a big blob of black in there. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe a little bit more black in the shadowing of the robe here. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with this. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. If you have any questions, you can absolutely give me a call or send me a message. Now when framing it, let me just show you the two of these together so you'll see the difference between when we add white to it and when we don't. I hope we can get these both in frame. So I think you should be able to see both of those. So this one has more of a glow to it because you can see the metallic kind of behind it. This one, not as much. It just, the white kind of makes it opaque and a little bit cloudy. Now when you frame this, you guys have a frame. I tend to take the glass out, put the metal in first, and then the glass behind it, and then the backing on, of course. This way you can definitely see the embossment, but you can also feel it. So if you have little fingers at home that like to touch and press on things like this, you may want to put the glass on top of yours. That's totally up to you. As far as cleaning, just a damp cloth or a Swiffer, something like that. You don't want to use anything that's solvent based, like a either alcohol or a Windex on it, because it could smear your alcohol inks. So really, it's a metal. It's not meant to be like glass shine. So a Swiffer or a damp cloth just with water, not with any kind of solutions. I hope you guys have fun making this. Please send us some pictures of your finished work and we'll post them on our site. If we get a lot of these as takeouts, maybe we'll run some type of contest, because we do plan on doing this back in the gallery once we are up and running again. Everybody stay safe, stay creative, have a good time, and relax. Bye.